Since long before I had a YouTube channel, I have been fascinated by conspiracy theories, both with the content of some of the more well-known conspiracy theories and the bizarre alternate realities that many of them propose, and also with how and why people come to accept them, because many of your very dedicated, convicted conspiracy theorists will not move from their favored conspiracy theory for anything, no matter how much evidence you present to the contrary, no matter how many arguments you make, no matter how compelling you might find those arguments to be. There are certain folks who just seem completely unwilling or incapable of letting go of whatever that fundamental claim at the root of their conspiracy theory is. There are some people who just refuse to accept that John Kennedy was assassinated by a lone gunman, or that astronauts actually traveled to and landed on the moon, or that the 9/11 attacks were actually carried out by Al-Qaeda terrorists. There are conspiracy theorists who simply refuse to accept these versions of the events and cling instead to their completely unsubstantiated alternative explanations. But lately I've encountered conspiracy theories of another type, and it's sort of woken me up to the fact that conspiratorial thinking is something that we all fall victim to from time to time. I think what is happening and what has allowed these conspiracy theories to grow and take root with the people that now hold them is an inability by many of these folks to accept a very unpleasant or unwanted reality. Something has happened that they just absolutely reject, disagree with, are dismayed by, are disgruntled by, and instead of accepting that these events have actually happened, or that these events represent some broader social trend or something that they find discouraging or dismaying, they instead have invented or latched on to this conspiracy theory that others have invented to explain why these things that have happened are actually illegitimate. And in a sense, they haven't really happened. So the first one that I want to talk about of these two recent atypical conspiracy theories is the belief by some movie fans that the overwhelmingly negative reviews that were written of the film Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice are the result of a conspiracy on the part of Disney. There are some apologists for that film, some fans of that film, that have insisted that the negative critical response was because Disney had paid off professional critics to dislike the movie, to give it a bad review. And then the sort of independent critics, or the YouTubers or bloggers or what have you, people like me, who then gave it a bad review, were just sort of following the crowd, were biased against the movie by the big time critics coming out so harshly against it. It's actually not that bad of a movie. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. It's just that all these critics were paid off to savage it and to poison the well. And of course, nobody liked it when they saw that, Rotten Tomatoes had a 30-something% rating when they went into the theater. It gave them a preconception as they went into the theater that it was going to be a bad movie, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. These are sort of the thoughts that this conspiracy theory is made of. Is it really that unbelievable that people wouldn't like a movie? Because look, I have liked lots of movies that the popular consensus says are bad movies. I talk about them occasionally in videos on this channel. One of my favorite, probably my favorite superhero film is Superman Returns, which is not well liked by the majority of fans at all, both die-hard superhero fans and just more casual viewers. There are lots of people who do not like that movie at all, who find it boring, who object to its portrayal of Superman, who just think it fails on fundamental levels. And that's just the way it is. I have not felt the need to concoct a conspiracy theory to explain why people didn't like a movie that I thought was splendid. It's just a difference of opinion. The DC films are already a distant second place to the Marvel films. Why would Marvel and Disney need to sabotage the critical responses to DC films when the critical responses to their movies are already so overwhelmingly positive? And their movies are so incredibly successful at the box office and so well liked by the vast majority of the people who see them. Why would Marvel, in that position of authority and superiority compared to the DC films, feel the need to resort to some nefarious conspiracy to sabotage the DC Comics films? It just doesn't make sense. And the second conspiracy theory I'm going to discuss in this video from the world of politics causes me to ask that same question when I think about it. Why would this be necessary? And this is the conspiracy theory that I have seen many of my fellow Bernie Sanders supporters propose, that the reason why Hillary Clinton has done so much better in the primary elections than Senator Sanders is because Hillary has somehow stolen the election. Hillary is guilty of a massive, essentially nationwide act of voter fraud, and she has won her leads in the popular vote and pledged delegates and superdelegates through unscrupulous means. She has cheated her way to victory. And just as the popularity of the Marvel films would seem to work against the notion that Marvel and Disney would need to sabotage the DC films in order to grow the success of their own franchise, the fact is, and look, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. I voted for him in my state's primary election. I like him a lot. But Bernie Sanders was never supposed to win this election. He has never at any point looked like he was going to win. He has actually done a lot better than anyone really expected him to do before the primary process actually began, before voters actually went to the polls or went to their caucuses to cast their votes. Senator Sanders has exceeded expectations. Things have proceeded more or less as predicted, with the exception that Bernie Sanders has actually done better than a lot of people thought he would. So why would Hillary Clinton need to cheat exactly? Why would Hillary Clinton need to steal this election that all the pre-election polls and all of the analyst expectations said all along, almost unanimously, that she was never going to lose? I don't understand. I don't understand what the motivation behind this would be. Even if we assume that Hillary is the cheat and the liar and the con artist and the unscrupulous crooked politician that many people have accused her of being for 30 years, even if we assume every negative thing about Hillary that we've ever heard is true, why would she feel the need to steal this election from Bernie Sanders when she was predicted to be winning it from the very beginning and has in fact been winning it for the most part from the very beginning? And if the argument would be, well, she planned to steal it all along, again, I ask, why, when she was never predicted to have been in any danger of losing the nomination? Why open herself up to possibly being exposed as a fraud through investigation of these alleged acts of voter fraud if she didn't have to do that? If there was no realistic expectation that Sanders would be a threat? Again, it just doesn't make sense to me. If you're a huge fan of Batman v Superman, if you think it was the best superhero film you've ever seen, it probably sucks for you that it has been rejected so emphatically by the body of film critics and by a very, very large portion of the film-going audience. But I see no evidence compelling me to suspect, much less conclude, that those negative reviews and negative audience reactions were due to some organized campaign by Disney or Marvel Studios to buy off film critics or bias audience reactions. I see no evidence of that. And likewise, if you are a very strong supporter of Bernie Sanders and you firmly believe that he would be the best candidate, I'm sure it can be very difficult for you to accept that he is not winning this primary, and it is very, very likely that Hillary Clinton will be the Democratic nominee. I'm sure that sucks, and that's very disappointing. But I see no evidence compelling me to suspect, much less conclude, that Hillary's victories in these primaries are due to voter fraud. There have been some irregularities in some of these primary elections. A very high-profile incident was reported in Brooklyn during the New York primary, where something like 100,000 voters discovered that while they expected to be able to vote, when they arrived at the front of the line at their polling place, they were not allowed to vote because their names had been taken off the list for a variety of reasons. But even if we assume that every single one of those voters who were kept from voting would have voted for Bernie Sanders, it still wouldn't have changed the outcome of that election because Hillary won by more than 100,000 votes. So while those incidents of voter suppression and while the overall movement in many, many regions of this country to make it more difficult for people to vote, especially people in racial minorities and people in impoverished communities, is reprehensible to me and something that I think absolutely needs to be addressed and fixed, I don't think any of that is the result of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign willfully working to keep Bernie Sanders voters from voting. I just see no evidence of that. But I think both of these cases produce the same lesson, and it's a lesson that all of us can stand to learn. And even if we have already learned it, sometimes we need to be reminded of it. And the lesson is that the line separating rational, skeptical thinkers from wild-eyed conspiracy theorists is not as black and sharp and unbroken as we might like to think it is. That the line separating conspiracy theorists from normally very rational people is a lot blurrier and fuzzier than we think, than we might like to think. And even those of us who pride ourselves on our reason and our logic and our skepticism and our demand for evidence and arguments can find ourselves on the other side of that line without even realizing it, because we are forced to confront an event that we find, for whatever reason, to be unacceptable. Hey folks, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like it and share it and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.